So we're recording now. We have, I think, at least 5 or 6 people on this talk tonight who are going to Galapagos in the next little while. And if anyone else is thinking about going, that's great. It's a wonderful place. Okay, I think I'm going to get going now. It's two minutes after 7. Let's share the screen. And of course, on here, how many times have I done this? And I'm still trying to figure it out. There we go. Okay, everyone, welcome to our talk. Appreciate you making it here tonight. This is being recorded, so we'll be able to share the recording with you afterwards if you like. My name is Marc Patry, and I'm the founder of Cultural and Natural Heritage Tours with my wife, Heather Blenkiron. We've been doing this since 1999. While we lived in Galapagos, so I was working down there more out of almost a volunteer basis. The salary wasn't that great. And on the side, we helped a few friends book some trips because we were there, we knew the scene. And voila, the rest is history. Now we run a small travel company specializing mostly in Galapagos. That's where we do most of our work, but we've now found someone's an expert in Antarctica, so he's on our team now and helping people plan their trips there. Tonight's talk is hosted by the Bucket List Nature Travel Meetup Group. The Meetup Groups are a platform that helps people get together and over certain common interests. And I've organized this talk through the Meetup Group, although some of you will have booked through the Eventbrite channel, which is also a good place to advertise events. So let's get going. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat box. I will try to look into that from time to time. Otherwise, you can always send me an email with your questions after this talk, and I'd be happy to answer them one at a time. So today, we'll be looking at a few things. As I said, we'll be looking at why Galapagos is so special. We hear about it. It's on a lot of documentaries, but I'd like to share with you why I think it's special. It's one of the first. It is actually the first ever UNESCO World Heritage Site to be recognized in 1978. So that in itself says something, right? Today there are over 1,200 World Heritage Sites, but the first one ever to be recognized as such was the Galapagos, and that's quite an honor. So I'll be trying to explain why it's considered to be such a special place. Galapagos, you've all heard of Charles Darwin. He spent 5 weeks in Galapagos in 1835, and it's not only here because he'd been on a 5-year journey, and also once he got back home in England in 1836, he also took another at least 20 years before he finally laid that egg of his book on the theory of biological evolution through natural selection. But he did get a lot of insights while he was in Galapagos. And one of the reasons biological evolution is on graphic display in Galapagos, one of the reasons, there's several. One of them is it's because it's an oceanic archipelago. Now, those are 2 important words. Oceanic means it's out there in the ocean, but it arose from beneath the waves. It's not an archipelago that it was before once connected to the mainland. And when we had the last ice age, the waters were down and there was movement of species. No, like Hawaii, which is another oceanic archipelago, it arose out of the sea as a sterile rocks, as you can see in this picture. This is not a picture of Galapagos. And it's an archipelago, another important word here, because it means it's a collection of different islands. It's not just one island. Because there's a collection of different islands, it has pushed evolution even further, and we'll look at that shortly. So by not having been connected to the mainland, it means that the species you find there somehow had to find their way to those islands all by themselves. They weren't brought over by people. The archipelago is 1,000 kilometers away from the mainland, which means that it's not as if it happens every day that animals come back and forth. If you had a regular interaction between species on the mainland and species in Galapagos, you would not have had biological evolution, because the species would be constantly, any new mutation would be diluted in the broader population. So by being isolated, it's you can guarantee that very few land species could actually make it there, and only those that survive under these new environmental pressures, were able to evolve over time. In fact, they were forced to evolve because they somehow managed to leave the mainland, which had certain environmental conditions, arrive in Galapagos, which frankly is a pretty dry, rocky, barren place. And it's likely that 99% of the species that arrived there died out, but occasionally some survived and they managed to adapt. They had particular adaptations, they had the right mutations, and they went on to create new species over time. So for instance, while Darwin was in Ecuador, he saw all these iguanas. It's called the typical green iguana, very common on the mainland. They're actually literally dropping from the trees. In the city of Guayaquil, there's a park we call the Iguana Park, and these iguanas are dropping from the trees. But Darwin saw this, but then Darwin went to Galapagos and he saw this. Darwin was not a stupid man, of course. He'd been studying geology for quite a long time, and he recognized that these islands were oceanic, volcanic, that had arisen sterile out of the sea. Yet he found on this island an iguana like this. He said, how did this iguana get here? He was pretty suspicious of the theory that God had created all the animals and placed them in all these places as is with no change. And he started to think, well, the green iguana from the mainland maybe made it to Galapagos somehow. And this is what we have now after so many years. So, but how? Why did it change? How did it do this? What made it change? These are the questions he was asking himself over time. And here's a coastal cormorant, very common. We have them in North America as well. And it arrives in Galapagos. And what happens? It doesn't need to fly anymore. So over hundreds of thousands of years, those offspring that had weaker wings or not such well-developed wing feathers somehow managed to do better than the ones that did. And that trait was passed on in their offspring, so that today it's the only place on the planet where you have the flightless cormorant. And it has beautiful blue eyes as well. You can hardly see it in this picture. So that's one of the reasons it's on the World Heritage List. It's a place like no other where you can, if you have the power observations and you're a bit of training and a bit of ability to observe and understand, you will see for yourself, wow, I can understand why Darwin, when he came here, started thinking about evolution and how it happened. So we have also an ecosystem diversity, which pushes species to further adapt. So in this picture alone, it's a bit enhanced, but you see green areas, which tend to be the places that have more vegetation, and the dark areas, which could be more recent lava fields. And you have large islands with tall volcanoes. You have small islands that are not with low altitude. Some of these islands are further from other islands. So as species inhabit and occupy the Galapagos, they may hop over from one island to the other, and they may hop between islands with more or less frequency, depending on the distance. And that itself will create differences between islands and allow for different forces to push these species to evolve in different ways. That's why in Galapagos you have, I don't want to give you the hard number here, but at least a dozen species of finches. Depending on what island you're at, some islands have combinations of 4 or 5, some have only 2 species, but each island has its different collection of finches based on their diversity of ecosystems and size. So here we go. And the higher up you go, the more it tends to be humid as well. So up on the highlands, you'll have a lot of plants, and the animals that require more moisture will be up there. So you also have these two. Darwin also saw this. Oh, that's funny. On the mainland, I see the green iguana. Here in Galapagos, I see 2 iguanas that kind of look like the green iguana, but they're distinct and they're different. One on the right, the marine iguana, goes underwater. The only iguana lizard on the planet that feeds underwater. And then the land iguana. And also, Darwin noticed these giant tortoises. They're massive tortoises. And here we have the 2 distinct varieties of the tortoises you'll find in Galapagos. You'll notice a difference between the shell forms, right? On the left, you have what they call the saddleback shell, which I don't need to explain. And on the right, you have the dome-shaped shell. And Darwin was in Galapagos. When he was there, the English were more or less settled. They're kind of more or less in charge there. This is before Ecuador took over. And he spoke to the guy, the head honcho, who's somehow representing the English government in Galapagos. And he told him that he could tell by the tortoise's shell shape where it was from. And indeed, it's the tortoises with this saddleback shape. It allows, by having the saddleback shell shape, it allows the tortoise to stretch its neck upwards as high as possible, kind of like a giraffe, so they could reach vegetation higher up than the one with the dome shape. The one with the dome-shaped shell cannot stretch his neck that high up. Why? Because the ones with the dome-shaped shells live in higher altitudes with lots of vegetation, more moisture. They don't need to be looking very hard for plants, whereas the ones with the saddle-shaped shells live in dry lowland islands with no high altitudes, and they're always on the search for vegetation. They need to stretch. So over hundreds of thousands of years, these two varieties have developed. So there you go. Also, one of the reasons that Galapagos is special is that it's bathed. It sits on the equator, right on the equatorial line, goes right through the archipelago, but it's bathed by different ocean currents. One coming from the north is very warm, it comes from Panama, and one from the south comes from Antarctica, the famous Humboldt current. A lot of us learned about that in high school. There's also what they call here on this slide, the Peru coastal countercurrent, but this is a current that comes from deep beneath the ocean, at the bottom of the ocean from the west, hits Galapagos, rises up with cold, oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich waters, which feed the marine life in Galapagos. That's why in Galapagos you have like marine iguanas. There's lots of food underwater, so they've evolved to go and eat it underwater. Lots of birds, whales, sea turtles, and whatnot. There's lots of marine life there. And so also because of this mix of currents, so you have a tropical current from the north, an Antarctic current from the south, mixing with the very rich waters, it creates for it's like a very multi-ethnic, if you want, collection of species. So this is the only place on the planet where you can see a penguin eating tropical fish. You don't see penguins eating tropical fish in Antarctica, but penguins live in Galapagos. It's not quite the smallest penguin out there. It's the second smallest penguin amongst all penguins. And it actually even ventures up above the equator. So penguins do actually live in the northern hemisphere. They tell you at school they don't, but they do. And of course, all this together, made Darwin question the whole foundation of the belief at that time. And one of his heroes, John Herschel, at the time, he wrote this in 1936, just a year Darwin came back. That famous line that they use, that mystery of mysteries, the replacement of extinct species by others. These guys knew back then, they knew that some species died out and then others arose. And it was very much in contrary to the common belief that God had put everything in its place. It was a radical thought back then. We take it for granted now, but it was radical back then. And that's why it took Darwin another 20 years to actually come out with his thoughts publicly. So what is the result? What do you get when you go to Galapagos? Well, you'll find a bizarre collection of animal and plants seen nowhere else on the world. Giant tortoises, in fact, used to occupy many more islands around the planet, in the Bahamas, elsewhere. But as soon as people arrived, could have been 10,000 years ago or what, the giant tortoises disappeared. You just didn't have places with giant tortoises and people on the same land. They just couldn't coexist. The people ate the tortoises. They're pretty easy to capture and eat. You'll have penguins and great lava fields, diverse marine life. And Galapagos is not famous for coral. Don't go to Galapagos if you want to see beautiful coral. The water there is a bit cool for coral. But Galapagos is famous for large-bodied species. You'll see sea turtles, sharks, rays, what am I missing here? Sea lions, penguins. If you're lucky, you'll get to snorkel with dolphins. You got to be lucky, it doesn't happen every time. And if you're extremely lucky, with orcas, that happened to a group of ours a couple of years ago, with whale sharks just 3 or 4 weeks ago, some of our people were snorkeling with whale sharks. This is very rare. So these are the kinds of things you experience while you're in the islands. And of course, as we all know, the animals are unafraid of humans. This picture here on the left of the blue-footed booby is classic. You just sit there on the trail, you walk by, and they don't budge. They're waiting for you to move aside. And of course, the landscapes. So that was my introduction to Galapagos. We all know it's a special place, and now I'll talk about conservation challenges. In a lot of the documentaries we see on TV, it's always beautiful. There's no problems. You know, the animals are living their, you know, they're living through their evolutionary destiny. But in fact, you know, I lived there for 4 years, and you know, it's hard to sleep when you live in Galapagos because and I worked in conservation, so you're always thinking about all the challenges and oh my God, you know, that's always almost the end of the world, and you're feeling this anxiety. But with a bit of a stepping back now after these years, I realize that of course there are challenges. They will always be there, but frankly, the government of Ecuador has done a pretty good job in responding. Ecuador is not the richest country on the planet, yet the government does realize that they have a jewel in their hands here and they have a responsibility, and they could be doing better. I think there's things that they should address these days, but generally speaking, so far they've done pretty well. So let's talk about that. First of all, they were first recorded in 1535 and settled in the early 1800s. And until recently, there was not many people living there. It was, you know, these islands, as I said, are pretty barren. There's not much fresh water there to be had. So they're not an attractive place to settle. But today there are about 35,000 people living there, and mostly on the four islands. And what has happened with the arrival of people? Well, you know, people come, they eat, so they farm. What do they farm? They chop down the forest and they bring their cattle. And here you have habitat destruction. It's one of the issues in Galapagos. And as perhaps you didn't see that at first, but here, in case you didn't, it's a giant tortoise among the cattle. You know, in fact, giant tortoises get along pretty well with the cattle. The tortoises love all the grass just as much as the cattle do, so they do pretty well there. Here's a satellite picture of the highlands of the island of Santa Cruz, just below the word destruction, and the bay there, that's Academy Bay. That's where the main town of Santa Cruz is. But up in the highlands is where people have farmed. Why do people farm in the highlands? That's where most of the rain falls. And over the years, because rain falls there, vegetation grows, the soil has developed there. It's not barren lava rocks. So, but before people came, that was also the richest biodiversity areas as well, where there's more rain, there's good soil, and this is where people have come to farm. So that has had negative effects on Galapagos biodiversity. Although, as I said, the giant tortoises don't mind; they'll migrate up to the highlands when in the dry season, back down to the lowlands in the rainy season. There was quite a lot of wildlife harvesting, you know, until you know, several decades ago, starting with the whalers. The book Moby Dick is based on a real story that took place not too far off of Galapagos waters. Fur seals were hunted to almost extinction, to the point where it was not worth looking for them anymore. So they survived, and they're still there today. And now you can see them when you go visit. And again, people and tortoises, as I said, they don't seem to manage very well together. And here's a scene, an old black and white picture. All you see is hundreds of shells of tortoises that have been slaughtered, right, for meat. And I'm sad to say that even today on the island of Isabela, out of the town of Villamil, there's still some hillbillies up there who will occasionally slaughter tortoise. Sometimes, I'm not sure if it's for meat or to spite the authorities who try to stop that. And there have been deliberate introductions as well. Goats. The reason I went to Galapagos was because of these goats. There were on the major island of Isabela, there were over 150,000 goats. That population had come from none, or for just a few goats in the 70s. This is ideal goat habitat. It's not too wet. There's lots of vegetation. And so they just multiplied like crazy. And they were turning forests into golf courses. And it was not a good thing. So when I was hired to go work in Galapagos, it was to do use the common word, it was a startup conservation project. I had to get it going, do some proposals, get the budgets, to bring in some experts, blah, blah, blah. But we got that project on the go. And it did work out. It was the biggest ever conservation project in Galapagos. And the goats, there are no more goats on northern Isabela now. So that giant tortoise will have a lot more vegetation to eat. So this is not one of those shells that allow him to reach very high up. So as you can tell, there's not much on the ground there anymore, thanks to the goats. So it really had to be done. Of course, people brought pets, dogs and cats. And also, hey, the blackberries, very tasty fruit, very tasty, but the birds also think they're tasty, and they eat the berries, and they spread the seeds throughout the islands. And those of you who know blackberries, they grow in thick bunches, and it's hard to remove them. And that's also a problem right now in parts of Galapagos. There have been accidental introductions as well. We have rats. When I lived there, we had a little rat in the house, and mice. But there's also insects and plants that just come by accident, like seeds, or even viruses come and more. We had when I lived there, canine distemper arrived at the islands. People have dogs, and canine distemper came. Now, living in Galapagos, a small town, everybody, the dogs are barking all night long. It's part of life. But when canine distemper came, within 2 weeks, no more barking. Problem with canine distemper also is that it can spread to the sea lions. So that was a very big concern, but the sea lions somehow managed to avoid it. So what are the management responses? Now, listen, I could talk to you for weeks, maybe not weeks, but several hours on all this. And I'm really cutting this presentation to the bare bones, just to let you know the general trends of what's going on. I'll just cover some of the management responses. First of all, the country created a national park, which is good. It's a sign that they want to protect the land. 97% of the land in Galapagos is national park. So only 3% is available for human habitation and farming. So the farming slide, people farming in the highlands, that's within the 3% of Galapagos National Park. So in a sense, that damage is there, but it's pretty well circumscribed. The Charles Darwin Research Station was established in 1965 with the help of UNESCO and the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, in cooperation, of course, with the government of Ecuador. They have a very good agreement with the government. It provides a lot of the scientific research that helps inform management actions, very useful. And of course, it was inscribed onto the World Heritage List in 1978. Doing so, what that does is it puts a flag on the place. It says, hey, and this, first of all, the government of Ecuador is the one that proposed it. It basically says we want to be recognized as a World Heritage Site. And in doing so, the government will have to accept the fact that it'll have to maintain the conservation standards and that the international community has the right to monitor how it's doing. That's how the World Heritage Convention works. So I worked at UNESCO for 11 years. And while I was there, I did go to Galapagos to monitor how things were happening in Galapagos. Was the government following through on its conservation commitments? So, and we would have the Intergovernmental Committee write back to the government of Ecuador saying, yeah, you need to do this, that, and the other thing, you're slipping on this and that. That's how the convention works. So it's a very powerful tool to keep governments in line in terms of their commitments that they publicly made to conserve a site. So there's also ecological restoration. That the woman who hired me when I went to work in Galapagos was on the team that figured out how to breed giant tortoises in captivity. It's not obvious. It's not obvious at all. And they tried, but they finally figured it out. So by the time I got there, they were repatriating these baby tortoises on islands from which they had almost been eradicated. One of the islands, a low-lying island, easy access. The whalers had just picked it dry in the 1800s. There's hardly any tortoises left at all. But they found some and they brought them over and they had them reproduce. And now there's over 1,000 tortoises running around on that island and they're breeding themselves naturally. While I was there also, the government established this biosecurity agency. So now before going to Galapagos, you have to have your bags checked, make sure you're not bringing plants or materials that could possibly be a problem in terms of a new species. So that's good. And there's projects that go to control and eradicate alien species. So, plants have been removed, animals, insects. As I said, we removed goats from a huge island, very big job. They're removing rats from smaller islands. Now that's very hard to do, but they've successfully removed rats. And also cats, I have to say, cats are terrible in Galapagos. They'll eat all the ground nesting birds and the iguanas and whatnot. So this is part one. I'm finished with the conservation challenges and the responses. It's a very brief review, but I just wanted to let you know that, hey, there's problems there, and the problems are recognized, and there's a bunch of systems in place to try to deal with them. They're never going to go away. You have to keep on working at it. I see there's some questions in the chat. I'm hesitant to look too much into that, but I will probably not look into that at all and move on because it is already in 7:26. I don't want to be talking all night. So the second part is I can get the slide to move here. There we go. Visiting Galapagos. I don't know. I have my screen says there's 41 of you out there listening, and maybe some of you are accompanied by someone. So my wild guess is that there may be 60 people more or less listening right now. And maybe some of you are thinking or would like to go to Galapagos. Some of you are going to Galapagos. So I'll be talking a bit about, in a very neutral way, the way people visit Galapagos. First of all, you have to get there. You know, people sometimes are not sure. It's fair enough. It's a far away place, but you know, they're surprised to learn that you can just fly there in a regular commercial jet, right? You get yourself down to Ecuador. The two main cities are Quito or Guayaquil. Quito is also a World Heritage City, has a lot more going for it in terms of a beautiful city than Guayaquil does. So we always recommend going through Quito. And then from there, you fly to Galapagos. And if you're getting on a cruise, we recommend you plan on spending 2 nights in Quito, because if you just spend 1 night and on your way down, something happens, a snowstorm, or who knows what, you might miss your cruise. So we wouldn't want that to happen. The next few slides are just commercial flights to Galapagos. It's about a 2-hour flight. The next few slides are just some scenes of Galapagos, the kinds of things you could expect to see while you're there. There are such things as super pods of dolphins, where you'll see 1,000 or more dolphins just all over the place from horizon to horizon, leaping out of the water. I've seen this on a few occasions now, and it is quite breathtaking. Nice to see. The iguanas are a classic. I think is the most iconic animal in Galapagos. I think it's more iconic than the giant tortoise, although the giant tortoise is what you see on all the logos. Penguins, snorkeling with penguins, they dart about like little fast underwater missiles. Hiking on fresh lava. This lava looks like it just came down last week. And if you have a good naturalist guide and you enjoy snorkeling, they'll be able to find some seahorses for you. Typically, otherwise, if with the untrained eye, it's pretty hard to find them. Dive bombing boobies. This is a site. There's only half a dozen here, but sometimes there are hundreds diving like this at the same time. It's just a spectacle. There's happens to be a shoal of small fish below, and they're feeding. Now, this is unusual in that there's only one sea turtle. Often you'll be snorkeling, there might be a dozen sea turtles around you. We call that sea turtle soup. And I can't forget the stars. I like looking at stars, and the Southern Cross is easily visible in Galapagos. It's visible in the early to mid-evening, mostly around this time of year, March, April, May, June. And the southern skies are richer in terms of stars than the northern skies, I have to say. I'm an amateur astronomer, and when I went down there, I brought a telescope. We're right on the equator. So in fact, you see both stars, both sides of the sky, and the southern sky is richer. So people will ask, when should I go to Galapagos? When's the best time of year to go to Galapagos? Well, there's really only 2 seasons in Galapagos. Basically, you have a hot season from January to April. We're in the hot season right now. It's hot under the sun. Some people say unbearably hot. Like, look at these poor folks on a barren lava field and blue skies. They all have hats. I hope so. But the water's warmer that time of year. It's also more pleasant then to go snorkeling because the water's warmer. And frankly, I don't think you need a wetsuit during that time of year. You may have occasional tropical downpours, but that's rare. We lived there for 4 years, and I think I witnessed about 6 or 8 of them in the 4 years I lived there. But they are quite a spectacle. And it's green. You don't think about vegetation losing all its leaves in Galapagos, but in the dry season they all go bare. Like I don't know if any of you live in the northern parts of North America, where in November there's not a leaf to be seen. It's a bit like that in Galapagos in a dry season. And the seas tend to be a bit calmer in the hot season. And although chop can happen any time of year, they tend to be a bit calmer then. And then we have the Garua season, which is a bit longer. And during the day, it's warm. You can wear shorts, a t-shirt, no problems. But the evenings are fresh. Then you like to wear maybe a little fleece and some long pants if you're outside. It's dry, but you have these mists that are so fine that you don't need a raincoat or an umbrella. They're just basically very fine droplets of water floating in the air, and usually mostly in the AM and PM. The sky you see in this picture is typical of early morning or late afternoon in the Garua season. But between 10 and 4 p.m., it might all clear up and be nice and sunny. And the seas can be cooler. Wetsuit is generally more appreciated then. No, if you're used to swimming in lakes in the north, if any of you are from Canada and go swimming in mid-June in a lake, that's probably what it's like in Galapagos in the cool season. And then there's the shoulder seasons, which kind of, they vary from year to year. Does the hot season end at the end of April, or does it continue into May and whatnot? So you never know. May, some people think May is the best month because it's not quite the cool season yet. It's still green, but it's not as hot as you get during the hot season. Though if you're from the north, like people in Canada, where I still have 60 centimeters or 2 feet of snow outside today, we like to go to hot places in January, February, March. So how about best time of year for wildlife? Frankly, any time of year is good for wildlife. All the iconic species you see, they're residents. They're not migratory. They don't go away. They're always there. You may have some that breed and their young appear in February. The others have young that appear in September. So you'll always be running into marvels of nature in Galapagos. I wouldn't necessarily plan my trip in Galapagos based on which animals are there. Perhaps there's a couple of exceptions. Let's see if I can get to the next slide here. Oh, well, what happened here? Here we go. So there's a couple of exceptions. Waved albatross down below. They're famous for their very elaborate and endearing courtship displays, and that peaks in July on one island only. But you can see it, they start at the end of April and go on until October, maybe. So if you absolutely want to see the waved albatross, you're a birder and you got to get the albatross. July is a good time to go. And the flightless cormorant is there all year long, but can only be found in a couple places. So if you want to see that animal, then you have to make sure your itinerary takes you to where they're at. And of course, the giant tortoises, they're in the wild. You can generally, on a good itinerary, you'll probably spot them in the wild. But on the main island of Santa Cruz, there are lots of wild ones, but they're all in the farmland. So one enterprising farmer has turned his farm into a giant tortoise reserve. And so you go up there and you walk around and you'll see giant tortoises all over the place. And land iguanas are there all year long, but again, you have to know where you're going to go. Land iguana is the one you see on the top here. So how to visit? Well, at this point of the talk, I'm going to cover two types of visitation options for Galapagos. And I'll tell you right off the bat, I think going on an expedition cruise is the superior way, but I'll talk about both of them. But let me talk about why I think it's a superior way first, because you don't waste any time, basically. You wake up and you're there. You wake up 6 in the morning, sun's coming up, you're anchored off some remote island, you have a nice cup of tea or coffee, and you watch the dolphins swim by. You're there, as opposed to a land-based visit where you wake up, you're in your hotel in town, you have to get ready, you have to go to the dock, you have to wait around with other people to get on the boat, to want to speed. Anyway, we'll cover that. So I think a cruise base is so much more pleasant, land-based or ship-based. But I'll talk about land-based first. Land-based, is sure, it's nice if that's what you like. You're staying in hotels, you're joining day trips to visitor sites. And you return to your hotel at the end of the day. Simple as that, right? Your evenings are free in town. You have a wide range of models. You have a full package. You can say, I'm going to buy an 8-day land-based trip, that's run by this particular hotel. You pay your money. It's all organized. You don't have to think about anything. This gives you accommodations with a clear menu of daily options. And you can also do island hopping, where you'll spend a couple of days on one island and then take a boat to another island where there's the next town over, because there are 3 main towns where you can really stay. And then do the same thing from that town, do some day trips and whatnot, and then move around from island to island. And the price range, oops, sorry, there's a bit of a typo there. The price range, I think it's important to talk about prices. Let's not kid ourselves. Galapagos is an expensive destination. The currency there in Ecuador is the US dollar. I'm for land-based, you're looking at $300 to up to $1,250 or more, depends, or less. It depends on how radically you want to spend money or save money. This is based on the assumption that every day you're going to be doing an excursion. Excursions cost money. They can cost $150 per person, $120, $200, depending on where you go. And then, of course, you have to pay for your hotel, your 3 meals and whatnot. So I'm thinking $300. You can stay in Galapagos and spend $50 a day. No problems for your food, accommodation. but you're going to be eating beans and rice, and you'll be staying in a pretty basic place, and you'll just be visiting the town and doing whatever you can do around town. Go to a beach. You'll see some species, of course, but when people talk about doing that, we tend to say, well, just getting there is a big effort and costs a lot of money. So if that's all, why not wait? I deal with a lot of young people in their 20s, and they really want to do it right now. If they have no money, fair enough. Are we all like that? And I said, wait till later. Most people we deal with going to Galapagos, they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and let me not go beyond, but it happens. And often they say, we've been dreaming about going all our lives, or this is a dream I've had, and they're planning, and they want to make sure they do it right. So that's what we tell the folks who say, oh, we don't have any money, but we want to go. Save up. Some people, they're not rich. They save up. They say it's so important to them. They're going to save up for 2 or 3 years so they can afford a nice trip to Galapagos. So, you can't deny that there are some advantages of being on a land-based trip. You can just stick around in your hotel in one day and not do an excursion. So if you say, I'm just going to read a book by the pool, fine, you could do that, or on the beach or whatever. Same thing, you can take the day off. You're on solid ground. Some people are concerned about being on a boat. And I guess I should have shown the statistics I have. We've been surveying our returning guests for a long time. And one of the questions we ask is, how much did the seasickness affect their enjoyment of the trip? And a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is like nothing and 1 is like terrible. The average answer is 4.3, I think. So basically, and I think 84% of the people voted 4 or 5 kind of thing. So for almost everyone, it's not an issue. Nobody voted 1. We have like 1% voted 2. So my conclusion is that but of all those people, probably 50% were worried about getting seasick, because they all tell me, where we get seasick. You're on a boat, typically after a day on the boat, you got your sea legs and things calm down. So just saying that. But on land, if you're really concerned, if you're land-based, you're on solid ground. However, to get out to sea, you have to get onto a fast speedboat. And often, my family, when we were in Galapagos, the only time anyone got sick was when we were on one of those speedboats, and we went on a couple of cruises. So I think, it's not quite that obvious, a trade-off. Of course, on a land base, you can spend time in Galapagos and spend less money. And I like this picture. I call it tortoise soup, not uncommon. That's probably a bit of the dry season, and they're all sitting in a pool of water. If you're on a land base, the downside is that you do spend time on bumpy speedboats. So it could be an hour, 2 hours, even more. And if the seas are a bit choppy, it could be far from comfortable. And then you have to come back at the end of the day. And you're also arriving at visitor sites, by 10:30 often, and the sun is getting high. And what does wildlife do when the sun is at the top, at the zenith, and it's hot? They seek shade and they rest and wait for it to go down a bit. So you tend to be there when wildlife is perhaps not as its most, dynamic, let's say. And of course, you only get to visit the sites that are closer to towns, that can be reached by a speedboat within a couple of hours. So you're not going out to the furthest reaches of the archipelago. You're missing out on the western shores of Isabella Island, where the richer seawater is found. And you spend your downtime in an urban environment. Now, some people like that. Sure, you get to go to a local cafe, a restaurant, or a bar, and that should be pleasant for some people. I don't deny that pleasure. I've enjoyed myself. But overall, it's a less efficient use of daylight hours. So if you're on the equator, the sun rises at 6, sets at 6, 12 hours of daylight. You have to be off the island by 6:30, off the visitor sites, and you can't be there earlier than 5:30. So when you're on a ship, you're there from sunrise to sunset. Whereas if you're doing a land-based, you're missing out on probably 6 hours of the 12 daylight hours, because you're just commuting there and back to where you're going. So there are higher end land-based options. This is a beautiful hotel, the Picaya in the highlands of Santa Cruz. Very nice. I was there for a meeting once, never stayed there. But I was there for a meeting during the Garua season, the cool season. And during that time of year, it's usually shrouded in mist. It's not a very pleasant place to be. But during the hot season, it's ideal. They do their dedicated day trips. They have their own ships, so it's high quality stuff. They control all aspects of your trip. And then there are lower end hotels, perfectly fine, but more basic. They say you could do a land-based trip, and there's someone will say, well, we're going to put you in that hotel, and then you got to meet us at that dock at this time of day, and so they don't own these lower end trips, don't own their services. They just subcontract them from other service providers. So on ship-based, you have to consider that. So now for ship-based, you have choices of itinerary length. They can go as short as 4 days up to 15 days. I think for the vast majority of people, 8 days is perfect. It's a nice sweet spot. It gives you a chance to really explore different aspects of the archipelago. Now, if you're a crazy, wow, passionate naturalist, take the 15-day cruise. That basically takes you the entire range of the archipelago, west, south, north, and east. It'll give you expose you to all of what Galapagos is about. Quite a number of our clients, in fact, they go twice, and they go once, they take an 8-day itinerary, and we hear from them the following year, we want to go again. We had such a great time. We want to do the other itinerary. So we have a mother and her daughter from Brockville, Ontario, not too far from where I live, who are just booked the second trip. They were there, I think, was it just after COVID, and now they're going back again. So that's nice. There are 65 ships that ply Galapagos waters. They range from 12 to 100 passengers, but there's only about 5 or 6 carry more than 20 passengers. The vast majority are smaller ships. We recommend a smaller ship. Why? You're going to Galapagos to commune with the environment, with the species, with the nature, with the natural world. You're going there to develop a sense of intimacy with it. It's not a carnival cruise. And I think the smaller the ship, the easier it is to get into that headspace where you feel, wow, this is a special place, and I'm so privileged to be here. And here I am, with just a handful of people that I've come to know on this ship, and we're sharing this unique experience. And I think a small ship can do that. When you're getting into larger ships, it gets harder and harder to do that. The naturalist guides on board have to make sure that timetables are respected, because they have to get everybody off and on the ship at a certain time. So it does, I think, intrude on that ability to develop that sense of intimacy that I think is important to get in Galapagos. However, I try to be neutral in everything. The 100 passenger ships, they're large, they have more amenities on board, and they probably have a small pool on board and whatnot, and these kinds of things. And they're more stable, of course, in the choppy seas. So, hey, sometimes if you're very afraid of the choppy seas, the 100 passenger ship is not a bad idea. There are some 48 passenger ships as well, 32 passenger ships that can offer a middle ground in that regard. Of course, there's all kinds of comfort levels. You can charter an entire ship if you want. We don't. It's not rare that we get called by people, usually the matriarch of a family or the patriarch says, "Oh, I'd like to, whatever. I'd like to take my family on a Galapagos cruise." So we help them find the ideal ship, the right size, the right comfort level. We look at itineraries and dates, and we help them do this. Invariably, they have a good experience. And the price ranges. Your lowest end ships that we consider viable, like there's a few, although less and less. Galapagos ship fleet has professionalized itself a lot in the past 25 years since we started doing this. Is about $400 per person per day. And if you're going up to about 1,200 per day, you can just about get any ship available in the islands. Of course, some ships will have these very, very nice cabins with all kinds of extra services that you can pay significantly more. If you just came in with some money and you want to just go crazy, that's possible. So that's how it goes in Galapagos. So some of the advantages. This is La Pinta. This is a 48 passenger ship. Okay? Look how calm the water is. Very nice, isn't it? It's not always that calm, but it is that calm from time to time. So on a ship, you're there early in the morning and later in the afternoon. Better for wildlife and photography. Those who like to take pictures, I think that early morning and late afternoon light is a lot more attenuated. It's not as sharp, and the contrasts are not so marked. So it's much better for photography. Navigation is done at night, so you're sleeping. You're not aware of it, and so you're always waking up at your destination. And you do get that sense of being away from it all when you're on a boat in the Pacific out there. Sometimes you don't see anything else. It's just you out there. It's fantastic. I threw in digital detox. So we do get people asking, well, how's the internet on the ships? And Well, some ships are putting it on. It's not that great. You know, you can check your emails and whatnot. Sometimes it's limited to a couple of hours a day. But don't think that you can go there and do your office work while you're there and do Zoom calls. Forget about that. You get to go to the furthest corners of the archipelago, places that are sometimes there's some ships that go to islands. It could be the only island, the only ship that goes to that island. So you're visiting an island that no other human beings go to on the planet. You know, you're the only one who goes there, and this ship visits it every 2 weeks. So that's kind of neat. Just the thought in itself is nobody on the planet comes here except for this ship once every 2 weeks. And of course, when you're on sea a lot, you're much greater opportunities to see whales and dolphins. As I said, orcas, pilot whales. There's even sperm whales out there. And whale sharks. It was 3 weeks ago when the water was just like this that the ship we had people on. We know that we know the owner pretty well, and he said, "Mark, you know, seas were calm, and the captain saw something in the distance. You know, a few kilometers away. There's disturbance on the surface, so decided to go check it out." You know, not all ships will do that. You know, they have their agenda, they have to be there, but they veered off course. Lo and behold, there was 40 whale sharks feeding at the surface. Well, it was just amazing. And they had the opportunity to jump in the water with their mask and snorkel. So on a ship, I think you get the most Galapagos out of each day. You squeeze as much Galapagos as you can out of each day. And of course, I think you develop a sense of friendship, camaraderie with the people on board. You're all there witnessing the same wonders, and you can't help but feel a team spirit there. I think there's only one downside for ships. They're a bit pricier, of course they are. You know, but if you can afford it, I think it's a no-brainer. Go on a boat and you'll enjoy it. So there are higher end ships. There's a small ship, the one we think is the prettiest ship in Galapagos. This is the Grace. This ship was actually gifted to Princess Grace by Mr. Onassis at her wedding. The ship is even older than that. It was used to evacuate the British Expeditionary Force from France during World War II. It was used then. So this ship's been around for a long time. You could tell it's got classic nautical lines. Not all ships look like that in Galapagos. So high quality ships are finely finished, quality finishings. You know, your food will be served beautifully, et cetera, et cetera. There's no denying it. It's pleasant to be on a higher end ship in that respect. But the budget ship options, hey, look, you might be sleeping in a bunk bed, but they're sturdy, the food is hearty, and they'll take you to the same places. The guides may not be as professional or as you would have on the other ships, but you can't have it all. So that basically is my talk on Galapagos. I have a last penultimate slide here where I say that if you happen to be in the neighborhood, Ecuador is a fantastic place. It's a tiny country. The land mass, it's about 0.01% of the land mass of the Earth is Ecuador. But you can see where 10% of the bird species of the world have been recorded in Ecuador. So it is tremendously rich in terms of birds and all kinds of other species. So bird watchers paradise. Amazon is just there. It's a 20-minute flight from Quito. And next thing you know, you're the town of Coca, which is the place you go explore the Amazon. I was there last year with my wife, and we saw a giant anaconda. We saw 2 or 3 species of monkeys. We saw sloths, giant river otters, caimans, you name it, and all kinds of birds. Very nice. Machu Picchu is an easy extension. There's a picture on the bottom left. It's just about, if you take about an extra 5 days, it's easy to go to Machu Picchu, Cusco, and the Sacred Valley. The Cuenca is another World Heritage City, top left. We visited that last year. Very pleasant. Just anything you can do. Horseback expeditions, cloud forest, go visit chocolate factories. Anything's possible, almost. Arts and crafts. So that's my slideshow. And just to tell you a little bit more about ourselves, our Galapagos team, here you go. My wife, Heather, Kelsey, and myself. Together, we have on our team the TripAdvisor destination expert for Galapagos. We have a voting member on the Darwin Foundation General Assembly. That's me. I'm also a board member of the International Galapagos Tour Operators. Heather was a former embassy representative in Galapagos when we lived there. They asked her to be their person on the ground, which we have interesting stories to tell about that. I used to work for the World Heritage Center, United Nations, so did a lot of focused work on Galapagos conservation. And the three of us together, we lived for 16 years in Galapagos, so we know that the area pretty well. And finally, we're regulated. In Ontario, all travel companies are regulated by the Travel Industry Council of Ontario, so you can be sure that we work professionally, we handle our accounts professionally and whatnot. So that's the end of my talk. It's 7:51 according to my clock. At this point, I will not open it up because I think it will be impossible to manage questions. But I do see in the chat there are questions, and I will look at them and see if there's anything. You can start writing your questions now. Someone is sold or buying a cruise ship. Well, that's good. Let's get in business. Someone mentioned Galapagos Safari Camp. Yes, that's another land-based option where you can stay there and go on day trips. COVID now, Ecuador has just basically eliminated all COVID requirements. No one's going to check anything, whether you're vaccinated or not, or whether you're wearing. They still encourage you to wear masks indoors and what place, but it's pretty loose right now. You're shocked that a cruise operator would prefer a cruise. Very nice. Although we do help people with their land-based options from time to time. I see no other questions, I think. I guess I can go back. How might the tortoises have originally arrived? Well, yes, well, they floated over. Tortoises float very well. And being all you think about is tortoises somewhere else, and there's a tsunami, and they're on the shore, and they get washed out to sea, and they float around in the sea. They can float around in the sea for weeks. And if they happen to land in some islands, well, they'll populate them. And that's why giant tortoises, until about 10,000 years ago, were populated many islands around the world. But as humans expanded their range and found those islands, well, the tortoises disappeared, because there's a lot of tortoise fossils and found in different parts of the world. See no question. Roger says, from my experience, the suggestions made here are spot on. Thank you, Roger. Appreciate that. So listen, at this stage of the game, you're free to go. I'm not going to hold you any longer. I said this would be an hour long, but if there are no more questions, I can just keep on talking about things, but it's nice to have some questions. My wife said to do a shout out to Cheryl and Mike, Katie and Catherine, and among others. I'm sure the others here tonight who are going to Galapagos with us shortly. Is it safe to travel to Ecuador? Well, we lived there. I raised my kid there until he was 3 years old. It's safe to travel to, I don't know, Chicago, New York City, Montreal. It all depends on your behavior and your street sense, right? Don't go walking around with your wallet full of $100 of bills sticking out, the fancy camera and Rolex watch, and in the side streets at night. Otherwise, I'm seeing some messages. Otherwise, you're okay. And Ecuadorians are very nice people. They're very gentle, especially I find the highlands. I've never met such a gentle people as in the highlands of Ecuador and Quito. We would have our young child. He was a year old. We would go up to Quito and we go to a restaurant, and the waitresses would whisk him away. Oh, he's so cute. They would take our child and we wouldn't see them. We'd let him go, and we would have our meal in peace. And when our meal was over, they brought the kid back. Kid friendly. Yes, that's a good question. I would say you should. If you're bringing your child, make sure they're very comfortable swimming and snorkeling, because they'll get so much more out of it. And we brought our children when they were 7 and 10. Well, one of them when he was 6 months old, but the other, again, when they were 7 and 10, and then 10 and 13, it was wonderful. I think around 7 is almost a cutoff age for kids, because below that, they do have to stay on a trail. They do have to follow the group. You can't have them running off in any direction. It depends on your own child and the level of the self-control they have, and it's up to you to call that shot. But make sure they're comfortable in the water, and they will have a great time. Altitude issues in Quito. Some people report that they have altitude issues, and I think having been in and out of Quito many times and being from a basically sea level kind of place almost, I found that going there, maybe I had a slight headache, nothing too serious. Didn't sleep so well the first night. And going up and downstairs, going upstairs, I should say, I realized, am I really that out of shape, or is it just the altitude? And I like to blame it on the altitude while I'm there. But beyond that, not a big deal. But some people are particularly sensitive to that. But for the vast majority, I don't think it's a big deal. Someone says drink a lot of water. I'm sure that helps. Mosquitoes and biting bugs. It depends where you're from. I'm from Canada, and I know mosquitoes and biting bugs here, and there's like nothing in Ecuador, in Galapagos, compared to what we have here in May and early June. But you know, there could be a few biting your ankles, kind of thing, and you know, they're not serious, not a serious thing. To get more information, do we Google for the website? Yes. Did I not put the website anywhere? That's terrible. So yeah, it's cultural and natural. It's cnhtours.com, CNH Tours. Just look that up and you'll find us in no time at all. Yes. What are the high-end small ships you offer? Well, we'll work with any ship. There's 65 ships out there. We're not stuck to any particular one. We tend to, if you approach us, we will ask you, listen, what are you looking for here? Do you want to, you know, are you looking for high end? Are you looking for more budget? What's your budget? Are you looking for more active or less active? And based on what you're saying, we'll narrow that down to some ships, and we'll offer you 3 or 4 ships to consider. We'll make comments. Well, this ship has a good itinerary. That one has a whatever reputation for this. You know, on our website is a little news story that I wrote about our 2 baseline ships. We use 2 ships, the Samba, which is 14 passenger, which is, you know, no bells and whistles, and then the Integrity, which is a higher end ship, 16 passengers. They're both small ships. They're both locally owned and operated. And we call them our baseline ships, because we basically say, hey, look at these. Tell us what you think. You're leaning towards that one or leaning towards this one. And if you lean towards one, then we'll say, all right, let's look at that. And maybe we'll bring in other ships that are along the same style and comfort level, and we can consider them. And that's how we proceed in helping you find a ship that's best suited to your travel style. That's what we do. Yeah, someone just put the our website on the chat there. Otherwise, you know, the way we work is my wife and Kelsey there receive emails and phone calls, and people ask, hey, we'd like to go to Galapagos, and how do we start? And so they just have a conversation with you. They just talk, and you could sometimes we talk to people, and several emails, talk for over a few weeks, and then we don't hear from them. That's life. We don't mind. That's part of the business. But then 3 years later, they say, hey, we're ready to book now. So that's always pleasant. So you know, it's a big deal. It's a big commitment for some to go to Galapagos, no doubt about it. And so you have to be certain you want to go, and everything's lined up correctly so that things work out perfectly. Don't wait too long. Don't wait too long. We do have situations where people, they have to cancel because of health issues or whatnot, and that's always a sad thing. We always say, do it now. We're running a trip to Africa, and Heather and I are going to be leading that trip in 6 weeks. So we're doing that. Heather wanted to go and do that trip, and so we decided to lead it. So we'll do it now. Great, Sheila. Thanks for your comment there. There's still 30 people online here. That's great. I'll talk till midnight. You stay online. And if we get down to 10, maybe I'll even turn the mics on. Actually, I'll turn the mics on now. And if you want to say anything, I'll, how do I unmute everybody? You can unmute yourselves now. If you'd like to unmute yourselves and talk and ask a question, feel free.
So how long ahead of time do we have to, right now, you're booked for next year already, or how long ahead of time?
Well, you know, no, that's not true. I think I can say that because this is my sister talking. People are booking now for very short term, which is it's a bit of a change that we find from before COVID. Before COVID, it was more, yeah, we're thinking about next year, you know, 12 months, 18 months into the future, maybe 6 months, you know. Now some people are looking at 2, 3, 4 months in the future. So, of course, the longer, you know, the shorter term you do it, the higher the risk that, oh, the ship we recommend is not available, or there's not enough speed. Let's say you're a group of 4, they only have room for 2, that kind of thing, right? So the longer you had your plan, of course, the more relaxed you can be about booking your trip, and also, you know, the more options you can consider. Take your time, and you're more likely to have more options available for you. Like you might have ship A you really like, but you want to go during this date, and that itinerary, it's not doing the right itinerary then. So there's all these little variables that get harder and harder to line up exactly as you'd want them the shorter term you book.
Okay.
We're I'm just going to talk now, but on the International Galapagos Tour Operators Association, we're worried. The land-based travel, the land-based tourism in Galapagos is not limited. There's no limit. And the numbers have been increasing very rapidly over the past 20 years. There was from about 5,000 people a year were doing a land-based trip just at the turn of the millennium. And now we're looking at 200,000 people a year coming on a land-based trip. Whereas the ship-based, the fleet is capped. There has been not, the capacity of the fleet has not increased since 1998 because the government said, that's it. There's going to be no more than 65 ships, and the sizes, these are the sizes. You're not going to get a bigger ship. And that has ensured a flat number of about 72,000 people a year visiting Galapagos by ship, which is great. And we think this is what Galapagos needs. And as a result, I have seen personally the ships we had when we first arrived in Galapagos, they're rat infested, or people were getting Montezuma's revenge, or the guys were groping the female passengers. You know, and some ships are literally breaking in half, and when they're moored, one just broke in half. You know, they're old, but because they capped the number of ships, the focus became on quality of service instead of just, you know, hey, throw in any old ship and put people on it and don't invest anything in it. So the ship fleet has really improved over the past 20 years tremendously. So whereas land bases is currently, you know, is kind of in the same place where I think ship base was. There are some high-end operators, but it's a bit of a race to the bottom. You know, yeah, our hotel $20 a night, and you know, and people are, you know, one of the inter-island ferries, which is kind of like a speedboat. They ran out of gas. They were in the choppy seas. It flooded. It sank. 3 people died. You know, what's that? You know, they were overcrowded. They didn't have enough life jackets. You don't get that on the ships because the ships are regulated. It's controlled. Land base is still a bit of the Wild West. So on the International Galapagos Tour Operators Association, we're just now preparing a letter. We're going to send to the Minister of the Environment. We're going to copy the State Department or Foreign Affairs people, and we're also going to copy UNESCO, and we're telling them we're concerned about this. That they're, despite, because UNESCO has also been making this request to control land-based growth, and there's been no movement. So it's the kind of stuff we do. We think that has to be done. Hi, Catherine Fair. Thank you, Catherine. You're going to Galapagos, I think, with us, eh?
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Hi. Actually, we are signed up to go with you
Megan.
next year. Yes.
Wonderful.
Next year. I can't remember. Anyway, so in terms of keto, so your recommendation is to arrive there like 2 days before the actual so-called excursion, and then on the way back, when we go back to keto, would the recommendation be is maybe stay overnight? What is there to do in Quito for X amount of days?
Sure. I mean, Quito's it's a diverse and interesting city. It depends what your interests are. I mean, if you're not a city girl, you don't like cities at all, well, maybe you won't like Quito, but it's from Quito, it's a base to do side trips. I tried to point out a few excursions there. You can go to the Amazon, you can go to the Cloud Forest, or Otavalo has a wonderful Indian crafts market. The city itself has it's the oldest buildings there are like 500 years old, and there's a long history in that regard. There's a rich culture. We take people on a city day trip, a city day tour when during that day before their cruise. We take them up the cable car to the very top, or the very close to the top of the Pichincha volcano, where you have an outstanding view of the city on a nice day. There are some wonderful museums. Walking around some of the parts of the city is eye-opening and fascinating. On the way back, depending on what you want to do, but if you just want to head home, you're maybe got to get back to the office or something. Typically, the flights return into Quito by late afternoon, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and typically a lot of flights going back home are red eyes. I'm sorry to say, I hate red eye flights. So then people might be leaving at 10, 11, midnight. So usually you can fly in from Galapagos, hang around the airport for a couple of hours, and grab your flight home onwards. It all depends on what your interests are and your schedule is.
Thank
Does that
you.
help, Catherine? Yeah. Are you dealing with Heather or Kelsey in your booking?
Oh, yes, we were working with Heather.
Very good. Okay. She'll help you with that.
Hey, Mark, it's Catherine here.
Hi, Catherine. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's Catherine. I was
Yeah.
talking to Megan. Megan. Okay, sure. Okay, all right. Go ahead. Yes.
Thanks so much. The slides were great, and I just wanted to say to the rest of the group that everybody at CNH Tours has been fabulous in educating me on the various different options. So if any of you are thinking of going to the Galapagos, I highly recommend working with them.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Catherine's from Ottawa. We rarely see we rarely see our guests. You're from all over the place. We've got guests from Singapore, the UK, Norway, States, of course. Most of our guests are from the States. I would say 75, 80%. So we never see you. So Catherine did drop by to see us the other day. It was very pleasant to see one of our guests. Thank you.
Yeah,
Catherine.
that was fun. Thanks very much.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to say goodnight now. Bye.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, there's my sister Michelle with a friend. Any other questions out there while you have me? The latest news, the latest scandals. There's been a lot of rain on mainland Ecuador on the coast. There was an earthquake there, even poor Ecuador earthquake last week. Some damage here and there, quite large, 6.5 on the Richter scale. The Guayaquil airport today was flooded. There's water all over.
Mark, this is Andrea. I have a question. Yeah, we're scheduled to go with you as well.
Yes, I recognize
I love
you, Andrea.
Yeah, I love the water, but I'm not comfortable in the water, so I'm not a great swimmer. Do you provide like snorkel life jackets that I can borrow? And
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not just think that you're not the first person going to Galapagos who's not so comfortable in the water, right? So the crew on the ships are used to that, and they will help you. If you're snorkeling, no, it's not speed snorkeling. You're not like swimming in an Olympic competition. You're floating around looking for things. It's all about nature observation, right? You're not chasing fish, right? You don't forget that. So you go to a place where the penguins are swimming, the sea turtles are swimming, and you get to see all that. That's cool. And if you get tired of snorkeling, you no longer, you can have a life jacket if you like. You just raise your hand, and the person in the Zodiac will come over and help you get out. Simple as that. What ship are you on, Andrea? Do you know?
We're on the Samba.
The Samba. The Samba's captain has a reputation for getting in the water. Not all captains do that. I'm the captain, right? I don't get in the water. So he does. And often they accompany those who need a bit more help. So he might even hold your hand as you're snorkeling along. I'm not guaranteeing you that, but that's the kind of thing that happens on some of the ships. You'll be okay, Andrea. Go for it. And go to the pool, put a mask on, snorkel, practice.
Yeah, well, I boogie board. I'm in California, we signed up for a trip with you 3 years ago, which we had to cancel because of COVID. And I started boogie boarding, but I've got a 4-3 wetsuit because we're in California and the water's about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So it'll
be warmer.
Cold.
It'll be warmer. It'll be warmer in Galapagos. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't have to bring a snorkeling.
No, the ships all have
jacket.
That. Ships have that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This is a trip of a lifetime. So we're happy, and Heather's been great. So yeah, thanks for your flexibility and can't wait.
Great, Andrea. Nice to hear from you, Andrea.
Thanks.
How are we doing, folks? We're down to 14.
Mark, can you hear me?
Ella, is that right?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
There's a growing number of solo women that are interested in travel. And I wondered how the different ships handle solo, or what do they offer, I suppose, for solo people. Maybe some people will be willing to share with a stranger. Are there ever a time when they waive the single supplement?
Good question. No, I'm going to say it's true. A lot of solo women. We do get a lot of solo women approaching us, but we very rarely get solo men. What are they doing? What are the guys doing? Hey,
Watching television.
Probably. Eh? Anyway, good for you. It's always a challenge to accommodate solo people. These ships can accommodate typically 16 people is a very typical number of people on a ship, or 20. And so if you put one person, they have 8 cabins or 10 cabins. Of course, you put one person in a cabin. Oh, there goes their numbers and whatnot. So some ships will have a solo cabin, not many, but some do, and they will charge a rate that is not the usual rate shared, but not outrageously much higher, right? And otherwise, the general rule is, hey, if you want it willing to share, great, they won't charge you any more than the share price. And if you don't find anybody, well, you get your cabin all by yourself at the regular price. It's a bit of a risky thing because sometimes you end up having a solo male, a solo female, but I guess you can work that into your annual budgets. But typically, if you're willing to share, often you can put people together. But it's always that, okay, we got a solo person. Okay, well, you're willing to share, you're there. And you may be sometimes on some of the samba departures we use, the captain will say, hey, there's a solo woman. Do you mind if we invite a scientist from the Darwin station, a woman, to join the cruise that week so that they can get a chance to visit the islands? A lot of people who work in town never go out there. It's expensive for them too, and they don't get paid that much. So it's a good opportunity for that. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Ella, but I guess we do our best. We look for ships that can offer solo cabins or willing to share, or the single supplement, which is not quite double, but it adds to the price.
Yes. Okay. So I guess you just dialogue with you, and you see what there is out there. Okay. Thank you.
We try to make it work. It work now.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. It's Megan,
Yes, Megan.
again. Yeah.
Yes.
In terms of, so I like the idea about the digital detoxing for the 12 days that we'll be on. But in case of emergencies, will the Samba have like a contact phone number or something?
Oh, yes,
some
there's
way to
always
contact in
the
case
ship.
of emergency, right?
Yeah, the ship is in contact all the time with through various means of communication. They can be reached any time of day or night, the ship. So if typically what happens, if let's say something happens at home and they need to contact you, well, you could tell your people, this is our CNH Tours number, contact them, and then we'll make sure the ship you get in touch with the ship and whatnot, and vice versa. If you're on the ship and something happens, we know about it. The ship people will tell us, hey, somebody broke their leg or something like that. They'll tell us the day it happens right away, so we can inform anyone who needs to be informed.
Okay, so it's a matter of so the Canada office is the hub then.
Yeah, if we leave with you emergency contact numbers as part of your travel documentation, so you'll have all that, and it's not a bad idea to leave that behind with someone back home, right? So that they know how to reach you while you're away.
Right.
Your cell phone usually is within data range, for a few days while you're at sea, now and again. And I have to say, more and more of the ships have some type of basic email service as well. So it's becoming a moot point now to try to, emergencies and not being able to get in touch with someone. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. We're down to 13. Very good. I'm impressed. Have any questions? If there are no more questions, here's my wife, Heather. She's I don't know, some of you have been dealing with her perhaps. I mean, a lot of people have signed off by now, but yeah. If there are any more questions, I'll happy to take them now, or otherwise I will recommend that you send us an email or call us. Our website is cnhtours.com, and happy to hear from you. So are we good?
Yeah, Mark, so for the side trips, if we want to do other side trips like to the Amazon or Machu Picchu, would we work with Heather to get recommendations?
Sure. Yeah.
And then is it safe for, single women to be by themselves in Quito and walking around? I mean, if we're not doing crazy stuff,
Well, it depends what your level of risk tolerance is, right? And Heather will say, no. And I will say, if you go to the usual places where it's, full of people, doing the things, in the daytime, think there's, and it all depends on your behavior too. If you look like you're totally lost and, like a babe in the woods, you might be more, people will notice you more than if you feel like you're just wandering around and enjoying yourself. So it's a question of your own travel style and level of anxiety over these things. So, but it's you have to be street smart all the time.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, great. I'm going to sign off, and then I'll just look for the recording. We have 4 other women that are going too, so they
That's
weren't able
wonderful.
to make it. So I'll share
Okay.
the recording with them as well.
Okay. Just to
Thanks,
say
Mark.
that okay, we're based in Ottawa, by the way, for someone who's asking, Liz is asking, yeah.
Do you have an office in Ottawa?
Well, our office is my kitchen table, basically. We're home-based business, right? It's just my wife and I and Kelsey. We're the backbone of the business. We have a Mercedes in Quito, who's our extension specialist. So if you do want to do extensions, and Mercedes is the expert. She's been in the business for over 25 years. So we put you in touch with her. She works full-time with us. And we have other people who are on call or help us with tasks in Quito, in Galapagos. We have our experts who work with us for Africa, and for Antarctica. So, but they're not full-time. These are just people who help us, answer questions, because I'm not an expert on those destinations. So we have people who are on our team. It's a good business. I recommend you get into it. It's fascinating. You meet a lot of interesting people, and there's always things happening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Yolanda.
Good night.
Good night.
And then the bucket list nature travel meetup group, is that something that you can sign us up for, or do we
go to it? No, you have to sign yourself up. Go to meetup.com, I think it is. And just sign up to the bucket list one, and then you're on. And if I put up a new event, a new presentation, you'll get notified, I believe, and you can decide to sign up or not. And whether you don't whether you sign up and don't show up doesn't matter. I had 100 people signed up for this talk tonight, and I think we were up to 40 at one point, or 42. It's normal, right? We all do that. We sign up to things, and sometimes when the time comes, we don't go. Yeah, as I said, I'm preparing. I hope I have someone from the Pantanal in Brazil, which is the largest wetland on the planet, who said they'd prepare a talk like this. And I've been telling them the style I'm looking for, and they're working on it. And I hope that they'll be giving a talk on the Pantanal sometime in May or June. The Pantanal is, if you want to see jaguars in the wild, these guys know how to get you to see them, kind of thing, right? It's a rich, when I was there, I saw anteaters, all kinds of monkeys again, and whatnot. It's a different ecosystem altogether. And I'm hoping to get someone to talk about Costa Rica as well, perhaps a little less exotic for some, maybe still for others. And he was going to think about what part of Costa Rica he would talk about, because I tend to encourage people to focus on one particular area and not a whole country. And so I hope to have this person give a talk as well in the future. And I kind of do repeats of these talks. I'm giving a talk on the Great Bear Rainforest next month, I believe. We're running a trip there in the beginning of October this year. And I'll be talking about the forest, what's special about the Great Bear Rainforest on the west coast of Canada, conservation challenges, of course, and our trip. I'll be talking about our trip. And what else? Antarctica, too. We will be giving talks on Antarctica.
Nice. Yeah. All right, great. Well, have a great evening, and thanks again, Mark.
Okay, Andrea, take care.
Good night.
Okay, good night. So, shall we call it a night, Katrina? Good night.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really enjoyed your session. And I had an iguana, and I kind of got interested in the Galapagos, and also I'm a member of the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club. So thank you.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I think you gave a presentation to them a little while back. I might have. I missed it. So unfortunately, but I will be definitely be looking at this trip. This was very interesting, and I'm a big conservationist. Type person, so it was very interesting to see all the information about learned a lot more about what to be aware of as well, like seasickness and altitude sickness. So thank you so much for that. It's great, and I look forward to your other presentations then.
Okay, Katrina, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words.
Thank
Take
you. You
care.
have a great evening. Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.